July's People is a 1981 novel by the South African writer Nadine Gordimer. It is set in a near-future version of South Africa where apartheid is ended through a civil war. Gordimer wrote the book before the end of apartheid as her prediction of how it would end. The book was banned in South Africa after its publication, and later under the post-apartheid government. Nadine Gordimer, 20 November 1923 to 13 July 2014, was a South African writer and political activist. She received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1991, recognized as a writer, who through her magnificent epic writing has been of very great benefit to humanity. The novel is set during a fictional civil war in which black South Africans have violently overturned the system of apartheid. The story follows the Smails, a liberal white South African family who were forced to flee Johannesburg to the native village of their black servant, July. Maureen tries working with the women in the fields, digging up leaves and roots. Afterwards, she goes to see July, who is working on the bakkie. When Julie says she should not work with the women, she asks if he fears she will tell his wife about Ellen. He angrily asserts that she can only tell Martha that he has always been a good servant. Maureen, frightened, realizes that the dignity she thought she had always conferred upon him was actually humiliating to him. He informs her that he and the Smails have been summoned to the chief's village. Though July has authority in his village, they still must ask the chief's permission to stay. Maureen struggles with her new subservience to July. After Gina goes to play with Nyiko and Bam goes with Victor and Royce to fish, a helicopter with unidentifiable markings flies over the village. The main protagonist of July's People, Maureen, is married to Bam Smails, a white, affluent South African architect. The couple has 3 children, Victor, Gina, and Royce. The Smailses pride themselves on their progressive, anti-apartheid views and always gone to great lengths to treat their black house servant, July, with dignity and respect. Maureen's father, the shift boss, made a fortune in the mining industry under apartheid, exploiting and mistreating his black workers for profit. Maureen is ashamed of her family's complicity in the oppression of South Africa's black population and tries desperately to distance herself from her past. However, while Maureen outwardly supports black liberation, her latent racism becomes increasingly evident once the racial hierarchy of post-apartheid society robs the Smailses of the status and privilege they enjoyed, if reluctantly, under apartheid. The Smailses rely on July for food, shelter, and protection in July's rural village, and Maureen struggles to accept this new power dynamic. While she acknowledges that her family owes their lives to July, she resents being beholden to him and begins to question his loyalty. Maureen's doubt about July grows after she sees villagers using items from the Smailses' home in Johannesburg, which July presumably stole over his many years of service. Maureen repeatedly confronts July about his abuses of power, such as when he and a friend leave the village in the Smails' bakkie without asking for permission. July's rebuttals to Maureen's increasingly hostile confrontations also shed light on the many ways that Maureen has unintentionally insulted and dehumanized July over his years of service. While Maureen never overtly confronts her latent racism, the culture shock and powerlessness she experiences while living in July's village gives her a new perspective on how alienated and oppressed July must have felt working for them in Johannesburg. In the final scene, Maureen abandons July's village and her family to chase down a helicopter that has just landed in the distant bushland, though she doesn't know whether the helicopter carries ally or enemy forces. Simultaneously too ashamed to confront or reject her internalized racism and other demons, Maureen abandons her old life in pursuit of the unknown. Smails is Maureen Smails' husband and one of the book's central protagonists. He is an affluent, white South African architect. Bam prides himself on his progressive, anti-apartheid views and strives to treat his family's black house servant, July, as an equal. These views are put to the test, However, when the Smailses flee their suburban home in war-torn Johannesburg for the safety of July's rural village. In July's village, the Smails no longer possess the racial and social privilege they benefited from under apartheid, and they're suddenly forced to rely on July for food, shelter, and protection. As such, the new situation radically transforms the power dynamic between July and the Smailses. However, while Maureen immediately resents having to answer to July, Bam's trust in July is unwavering, at least, at first. Like Maureen, Bam's latent racism becomes increasingly apparent the longer he resides in July's village. While Bam appears outwardly supportive of black liberation, he constantly tunes into the radio for news of an end to fighting and a return to the white-controlled status quo. He also underestimates the black villagers, as evidenced by his completely illogical assumption that nobody in the village is aware of the shotgun he keeps hidden in the thatched roof of his family's hut. Additionally, Bam and Maureen both resent July's insistence on keeping the keys to the bakkie, the Smailses' pickup truck. They panic when he and a friend drive the vehicle into town without asking the couple for permission. Bam grows increasingly distant from Maureen as they both struggle to accept the reality that their desire to return to their old life under apartheid contradicts their outward espousal of liberalism and racial equality. Martha. July is a black man who has worked as a house servant for the Smails family, who are affluent, white South Africans, for 15 years. When a black uprising overthrows apartheid rule in South Africa and puts the country's minority white population in danger, the Smailses accept July's offer to shelter them in his rural village. While Maureen and Bam Smails are grateful to July for saving their lives, the move drastically alters their relationship with him. Suddenly, they must rely on their former servant for food, shelter, and protection. In apartheid-era Johannesburg, in contrast, July was at the mercy of the Smailses. While Maureen and Bam always made a point to treat July with more respect than most wealthy, white South Africans treated their black staff, July's existence as a black man was more oppressive and stifling than they could appreciate. The Smails might believe that they have a good relationship with July, but the racial and social superiority that apartheid afforded them has always prevented them from interacting with him as equals. When the black uprising ends apartheid and renders white people powerless, the power dynamics in July's relationship with his employers shift, and the Smailses begin to question July's loyalty and honesty. One early source of conflict is July's decision to keep the keys to the Smailses' bakkie. July's control of their vehicle effectively severs the Smailses' last remaining connection to their old life and reaffirms how beholden they are to him. July has a wife, Martha, to whom he sends letters and a portion of his salary. The couple isn't very close, however, since July only returns to the village once every 2 years. Martha and July's mother disapprove of his decision to house the Smailses. Both women criticize July's decision to continue to serve the Smailses, reminding him of the consequences he could face if people outside of his village discover that he is helping a white family. July, too, struggles to reconcile his allegiance to the Smailses with his loyalty to his people. Nevertheless, July continues to protect and provide for the Smailses, even as they grow increasingly resentful of the new power that he holds over them. Martha is July's wife and the mother of his children. Because July can only return to his village once every 2 years, Martha and July don't have a very close relationship. Prior to the violent situation in Johannesburg forcing July and the Smailses to abandon the city, Martha's contact with her husband was limited to letters and the regular paychecks he would send home to support his family. Martha opposes July's decision to house the Smails family. She struggles to understand July's loyalty to the Smailses and what compels him to continue to serve white people who no longer have the means to pay him. Like July's mother, Martha has had minimal contact with white people and generally distrusts them. She urges July to convince the Smailses to seek shelter outside of July's village. While Martha never becomes friendly with the Smailses, she respects July's loyalty to the family by helping them out herself. For instance, she gives Maureen an herbal medicine to help with the children's coughs. She also chastises July's mother for being judgmental of Maureen's ignorance about the region's native plants. July's mother is an elderly woman who lives in the village with the rest of July's extended family. She agrees to give up her hut to house the Smales family when violent riots force them to flee their home in Johannesburg. Like Martha, July's mother is skeptical of the Smales and white people in general. She complains about the Smales' extended stay in the village but goes along with her son's requests. July's mother has difficulty understanding her son's loyalty to the Smales. Unlike July, she has never served white people and is vehemently opposed to taking orders from them. While July's mother is not openly hostile toward the Smales, she regards them skeptically. She believes that all white people are trouble, even those as desperate and powerless as the Smales family. Daniel is a young black man who lives in July's village and is friends with July. He teaches July to drive the bakkie, and the two of them spend their days working on or hanging around the vehicle in its hiding place outside of the main settlement. Bam teaches Daniel to shoot after Daniel expresses interest in the gun, foreshadowing Daniel's later decision to steal the gun from its hiding place in the thatched roof of the Smales hut. Unlike July, whose loyalty to the Smales family somewhat contradicts his allegiance to his people and black identity, Daniel is steadfast in his support of black liberation. At the end of the book, after stealing Bam's shotgun, Daniel runs away to join the black fighters. Ellen. The chief has authority over settlements in July's region. After word spreads that July is housing a white family in his village, the chief orders the Smales family to see him. He will allow them to remain in July's village, but only if they ask for permission in person. That the Smales must appeal to a black authority figure to be in a black-dominated space illustrates how radically the end of apartheid has upended the racial hierarchy. During the Smales' meeting with the chief asks Bam many questions about the ongoing civil war and expresses interest in learning to shoot Bam's gun. Bam is shocked to hear the chief claim that he would prefer to shoot black rebels than cede his land to outside tribes that have joined forces with the South African fighters. The chief condemns black liberation and the ongoing war. He wants the white apartheid government to take back control of South Africa, since their system protects his land from being invaded by black people from outside tribes. Lydia. Ellen is July's town woman, a black office cleaner with whom July had a romantic relationship while working for the Smales in Johannesburg. July loses touch with Ellen when he and the Smales flee Johannesburg for July's rural village. Maureen uses Ellen as leverage against July. She condemns July's ignorance about what became of Ellen after he and the Smales left Johannesburg and judges him for having an extramarital affair in the first place. When July orders Maureen not to work in the fields with the other village women, Maureen assumes that July is afraid that she will tell Martha, July's wife, about Ellen. Gina. Lydia was an older black woman whom Maureen's wealthy family employed as a servant when Maureen was a child growing up in a mining town. She would regularly walk Maureen home from school. Lydia sometimes scolded Maureen, but other times they were conspirators, laughing and trading gossip together as friends. Maureen remembers one scene from her childhood when a photographer stopped her and Lydia on the street to take their photograph. In the photograph, which Maureen only stumbles upon years later, Lydia carries Maureen's backpack balanced atop her head. When Maureen reflects on the photograph as an adult, she can't believe how unaware she had been of the power dynamics between herself, her family, and Lydia. In retrospect, the backpack balanced on Lydia's head is a glaring symbol of Lydia's subservience to Maureen. Maureen reflects on this memory of Lydia during her stay in July's village, implicitly drawing a connection between her former ignorance about the nature of her and Lydia's relationship and her present inability to make sense of her relationship with July.